Shit's about to get real serious real quick, guys. I know I've been saying this for a year, but this is not going to go over well. This does not end in a nice way. Venezuela has ordered all of its tankers to turn around and head back to Venezuelan sovereign waters. Now, this is May 8, 2018. PDVSA, they call it PDVSA, so I'm just going to use that term so everybody knows what we're talking about. PDVSA is an acronym for a state-run oil company that services Venezuela. Venezuela state-run PDVSA suspended oil storage and shipping from its Caribbean facilities following a move by ConocoPhillips to temporarily seize the firm's assets on 4 islands. PDVSA has been concentrating most shipping on its main crude terminal of Jose on Venezuela's eastern coast and recalling tankers to Venezuelan waters to avoid seizures that would further cut its exports and worsen an economy on the verge of collapse. Yeah, we've heard this forever. Verge of collapse for 3 years. Now, the Dutch authorities and the Dutch Navy aren't talking because they're still looking at the situation to figure out who's going to do what enforcement where, and who's eventually going to stand nose to nose with the Venezuelans and say, hey, we're going to take that boat from you now, and watch themselves get shot in the face. Because they're not going to let this go down. It's just not going to happen, not without a fight. In Venezuela, cargoes arriving from the Caribbean have begun creating bottlenecks vessels around Jose and the docks that serve PDVSA's biggest refinery, the Paraguay Refining Center, according to the data. Now, some of these are actually Russian tankers, and that's going to complicate things even more. Monday night, PDVSA ordered the Aframax tanker British Signet, which was waiting to discharge in Curacao, to divert to Venezuelan waters. According to shipper, the vessel had loaded crude at Russia's Primorsk terminal last month and arrived in Curacao, Bullen Bay terminal, on Sunday, 2 days after the arbitration order went into effect. Now, I know there's a lot of you out there think, well, this is what you get for expropriating blah, 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 blah. The only reason ConocoPhillips or any big oil company was in Venezuela to begin with was because it was required by the IMF a long time ago. The IMF, Venezuela was forced to take loans from the IMF, and under those terms, they had to allow foreign investment, and this was something that they were arm-twisted into doing a long time ago. Halliburton is still there, Chevron is still there, ConocoPhillips is there. This isn't something where the Venezuelans wanted them to come in. And the reason they were forced to take the IMF loan goes back to something that happened a long time ago. I put the link to that in my last video. I'm not going to get into it here. But just in case anybody thinks that the Venezuelan fleet forces in their territorial waters are some rowboats, this is what they have. It's the Waikari class offshore patrol boat. It is a very modern, very nasty little boat that you do not want to see coming at you unless you're something from a navy that's a lot bigger. It is outfitted with some of the most state-of-the-art equipment, and there's a little video down here I thought you might want to see. We have weapons like this on our vessels. Just so you know, they're not going to row out and start, lobbing cannonballs. These guys are a real deal Navy. And they have surface-to-air missiles. They have exocet anti-ship missiles on these vessels. They're really no joke at all. Now, I do find it ironic, though, that we have the Abraham Lincoln in the region. Right here. It's being reported that they're doing vessel maneuvers off of Virginia, but this little dot here looks a heck of a lot closer to Florida. This could just be poor graphics, but they have been doing, just so you know, I'm not making this up, abandoned ship training Now, this could just be something that was scheduled. I'm not saying that the aircraft carrier, the Abraham Lincoln, is worried about being sunk anytime soon. But it might be something where they might have to think about dealing with problems. And they need their crew to be on edge, frosty, so to speak. So I got thinking about some things, and I decided to do a map to try to illustrate what might happen if the George Washington would attempt to get involved in this interdiction issue with Venezuelan tankers. Now, Venezuelan tankers are not only just here in Venezuelan waters, they are up here in Cuban waters. They are represented by these little purple dots. Now, we know that there are Russian jets and Tu-160 backfire bombers on the tarmac in Venezuela. We've established that. We've also established that there are Chinese assets peppered throughout this region. There's also Russian jets in Cuba, Russian naval assets in Nicaragua, and, of course, they're always not too far away offshore. Now, this being the only real path the George Washington could use to enter the Caribbean Sea from the Atlantic, it would put it in a pretty tough position. Because if it's really going to try to use air power somehow to affect this, I'm not sure how they would do it with air power. This might be something more suited to the Kearsarge, an amphibious landing vessel that would have the ability to go and put boots on ground over here and get a hold of these vessels. Now, I've used these two little purple vessels here to represent those Guaqueri class patrol ships. It would be a very difficult operating environment, to say the least. It really would, because they would have it on all sides. And these vessels are bound for all sorts of different locations. A lot of them are just Cuba, but quite a few of them are bound through the canal for China and back out through here for Russia. So I'm sure there would be interest, at least by the Russians for sure, in making sure that that free flow doesn't stop. And it's not something that is going to be going away anytime soon. And the problem with this is, unlike over in the Middle East, where everyone has pretty much gotten used to the fact that there's always people shooting at each other all the time. Okay, that's been paradigm since the 60s and 70s over there. That doesn't affect insurance rates. Normal shipping through here, if there starts to be a problem here, is going to skyrocket the insurance for it. Fuel is already going through the roof because of the Iran thing. And that only plays right into the Venezuelans, the Chinese, and the Russians' hands. Because the higher fuel goes, the more solvent Venezuela becomes. And yeah, they're going to need some reinvestment to get some people back, to get things back up and running again. But the Iranians built these refineries. We established that 4 or 5 videos ago. And they're making deals with the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Chinese, the Russians. There's going to be people down there. And this was always my issue that I do not understand. And this goes back to the last administration as well. What was the end game with sanctions? You knew they weren't going to just walk away quietly, that they were going to turn the damn thing into a dumpster fire. What was your plan for after everything fell apart? Even the people that you call the opposition, that you support, that are U.S. friendly, are far, far left of even the most leftist people in America. Everything down here has always been state-run. They only allowed foreign investment because they were forced to. They were arm-twisted to by the IMF. And the one president they had that tried to do some things that were open market, free market capitalism, over 1,500 people were killed in riots when he tried to do that. And you can watch the video that I put a link to in my last video that covers this. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing. This is the big lie down there. They talk about, well, because Hugo Chavez did this, Hugo Chavez did that. Hugo Chavez was really no different than any other president down there, other than he had a different type of socialism. It was called participatory democracy. The people before him, they weren't a bunch of conservatives. They weren't a bunch of right-wing, pro-U.S. types prior to him. Absolutely not. They had all sorts of problems down there, and this country has always been mostly oil. You see, and that's the other point too, and I'll leave with this. If they take a bunch of money and they reinvest it in oil infrastructure, like the U.S. says they should have been doing, then they accuse them of being, not diverse enough economically. If they take the money out of oil and they put it into other places, then they're saying, well, they're neglecting the oil industry and they're mismanaging the economy. Those are the two choices. And you do have to understand what it was like to have the U.S. for 30-something years be a member of OPEC, oil, petroleum exporting countries, and not legally be able to export oil until 2015. And just ever so coincidentally, right when the U.S. ban on exporting oil for profit lifts, the country with the largest oil reserves in the world craters. Its ability to export craters. Imagine that. What a strange coincidence. And the people who are whining and crying now, ConocoPhillips, Chevron, and Halliburton, really. Yeah, I'm sorry if I don't feel so sorry for them. No, I really don't. Especially given the fact that right next door, if you want to talk about the absolute example of everything evil you could possibly imagine, human trafficking, child trafficking, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, corruption, violence, violations of human rights, Colombia is literally the poster child for all of those things. Yet they get $500 million a year from the United States. Yeah, $500 million with a B. And there is just as much evil, just as much crap going on in Colombia, and has been for a long time, that's ever been going on in Venezuela. So, anyway, I'll leave it there. Pardon my artwork. I'm not a great crayon drawer, especially with a mouse. But anyway, this is kind of what I was trying to communicate to you guys tonight. So take care, and we will see you next time. Thank you.